Uh, Good morning, everyone. Welcome you to the another semester, and we are meeting in a subject which is called as a APL, Advanced Programming Laboratory. So, before actually diving into the content, let's have a brief discussion about how we will look at this course. So, we are not going to look into this course as a programming laboratory only, like we did it same for the C++. We were learning something called as a computer science, and we were trying to implement the concepts that are studied into computer science using a programming platform. If you just go through the syllabus of APL, you will find that it is focusing on Java as a development platform. But when you dive into the details of the content, you will find a lot of concepts like networking, creating servers, then threading, which is from the operating system, creating multi-threaded servers, which is a blend of networking topics and threading topics from the operating system, implementing algorithms. Then you have a collection chapter. Also, there is a concept from the databases where we are supposed to learn MySQL or MySQL, rather SQL, which is a structured query language, which altogether a new syntax and new terminologies while dealing with the databases. You are parallelly learning these concepts in two subjects. One is a database engineering, and another one is operating system. Concepts from the networking, you have already seen these concepts into DCN and CN, so we will be just implementing them. So my point here is, do not take APL course as just you are learning another coding language or learning a syntax. Take it as what you are learning into the parallel streams of computer science. Those concepts, you will get a chance to implement them practically. For example, right now these words will not make sense to you, but later as you proceed with the database and OS and the network, you will these terminologies will make sense to you. Like what is a thread, what is a monitor, what is a semaphore, how the load balancing is done, how multi-threaded servers work, how to connect to a database. There are two modifications specifically. If you download the syllabus and how we will proceed in the future, there will be two modifications. One, first modification is in database section. There is a syllabus is covering only MySQL or SQL, structured query language, wherein we are going to add MongoDB this semester. Like we will be learning SQL syntaxes as well as we will add MongoDB syntaxes. Another modification is we are going to explore what is called as lambda expressions in Java. So that is a kind of a functional programming touch we given inside Java, and we are going to explore that for creating massive threading applications. Like Java have a threading support, which will turn your single application into a parallel execution environment. But we have, as a programmer, we have to create threads manually. We are the one who will create thread for each and every task by controlling the piece of the code, by writing the piece of the code. Instead of that, lambda expressions are the one where we have to just pass on the information what we are expecting to do, and in the background, these lambda expressions will make your code run in parallel whenever it is possible. So two major differences: if you write a code in a plain way, then you have to create threading on your own. If you want to leverage the threading examples of Java, or you want to use the threading classes in Java. Second scenario, you write a plain code with the help of lambda expression, and the lambda expression takes care of creating massive threading whenever it is possible. So we'll see these both scenarios. So two changes in the contents that are available on the website. One, we are going to add MongoDB. Second, we are going to try to add lambda expressions if time at all permits, because we are not going to curtail anything which is existingly present in the content. So we are not going to cut down anything, but we are going to 100% add MongoDB concepts. Second, we are going to try to add lambda expressions. I hope you got some changes. I think you should go through the contents available on the website, and let's proceed with this start of the Java. Uh, shall we start? I need some feedbacks on the chat, so it will be clear that you have heard what I've said.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. So let me share my screen with you. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hello, sir. You are not audible.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, great. I by mistake I muted my mic. Great, fine. So we will start our journey by looking at a pyramid of Java programming. Like I've created this pyramid from like putting some bricks from the at the base till the top. So this is the reasoning that that will justify why one should be interested in learning Java programming platform. So, like, say, what is the basic brick of this pyramid? It says that you already know some of it. It's OOP. So, in the last semester itself, we have seen OOP, object-oriented programming. Rather, it's a strict OOP. So, what do you mean by strict OOP? We will see shortly when we'll start programming. So, Java is a OOP. Not only OOP, it's very strict OOP. If you have to do anything, you have to follow all the terminologies which are provided by OOP. Otherwise, you can't even write a hello world program without using OOP concepts. So that's is like you already know some of it. Rather, it's a strict OOP. The very important point, it's a open source. Like when Sun Microsystems started this, they started this project as an open source, and they keep on the promising that this language will be a open source language. So you can download the source code, you can tweak with the source code. As Java has become open source, you will find flavors of Java Development Kit (JDK) or Java languages. The flavors like one is provided by the Oracle right now, which is the parent company of Java. Another development is supported by open source movement, which is OpenJDK by OpenOffice team. In Linux, mostly you will find by default OpenJDK is getting installed. And in other platforms, you have a choice whether to install OpenJDK or whether to install JDK or from the Oracle. It have a very rich API. Like you will not find application areas. You will not find a single application area where there is no presence of Java. You go anywhere, you will find Java is present somehow. Uh, like if I have to give a recent example that everybody may have seen or at least have heard about it is Minecraft game. I'm sure that most of you have heard about Minecraft game or in other way have played it. So there are a few questions. Okay, yes, Harshit. So okay, so you have heard about Minecraft game. So this Minecraft game, if you go and see into the other platforms, like if you have a Linux platform, you will see that Minecraft game is available in Linux. Windows machine, it is available in Windows Store. In Mac, it is available in Apple Store. Linux, it is available in App Store. So how come a single programming, how come a game is available in all three platforms and the execution is almost same? The reason is Minecraft multi-platform support is built on Java. So Java allows you to develop something once and execute always. So that's how Java is having a great community support and great applications. So recent example that you may have used is like Minecraft game, which is available on all the platforms. And the very top reason is lots and lots of opportunities for the skill. So we are not learning syntaxes, we are learning a skill. If you learn this skill, you will be able to upgrade yourself anytime you want. Like don't focus on we are learning some syntax like how to what is the spelling of this, what is the spelling of that, and then use it. No, we are learning on developing a skill. So there is a lot of opportunities for the skill. So let's begin. So world before Java. So what we used to have is, or what we have done in our laboratories also till this, is write a source code, compile it, and get a machine code of it. Write a source code, compile this one, and get a machine code of it. That is the world before Java. So somebody will ask, what is the problem in this? It's fine. You write a source code, compile it, get a machine code, and then execute it. Now, what is wrong with it? Like, say, right now, I think most of you are using either Windows platform, some of you might be using Linux platform, and some of you might be using Mac platform. So, what will happen is, if I create a, let's say, if I create a program in Windows and if I compile it using Windows compiler, then I will shift this compiled code to you. Then you will not be able to execute it. Like if you are using a Linux and if I send you the .exe file, you won't be able to execute it. If I send you this .exe file and you are using a Mac operating system, then still you are not able to use it. Then what's the solution? Solution is I have to provide you a source code for the Linux guy. For the people who are using Windows machine, I will provide my what we can say exe file. For the person who is using Linux machine, either I have to provide my source code or I have to recompile my program using Linux compiler and send you the .out file or the executable file of Linux system. My third student who is using a Mac operating system, what I have to do is I don't have access to the Mac OS, so I have to beg, borrow, buy, whatever it means, and take a hand on a Mac compiler, compile my program source code using a Mac compiler, get that executable file and give it to you, or give my source code to you. So if this is the wrong, how come it's going to affect your life? So these all compilers are generating their own independent machine code. Like Linux compiler is generating a machine code for Linux. Windows compiler is generating a machine code for Windows. Mac OS compiler is generating a machine code for the Mac. And these all machine codes are totally independent. They have nothing in common. Like you can't execute machine code of Windows in Mac, machine code of a Mac in Windows. They're completely different. So how come it's really going to affect your life? So let's say that you are a software developer or you own an IT company and you have three clients with you. Like your first one is using Windows, second client is using Linux, and third client is using Mac OS. What do you have to do? You have to have all three platforms available at your end. Like for the Windows client, you have to program everything in Windows, compile it for the Windows libraries, Windows machine code, and then ship that build for the Windows clients. If you have a client which is working in Linux, compile everything for Linux and ship it for the Linux client. Now, let's say that you don't have a Mac operating system with you and the new client wants to join your firm and that client have a requirement like I want to use a Mac machine. What you have to do is like Windows, you may have a OEM installed. Linux, you may install a VirtualBox and get it done. Mac, somehow you can manage it by virtualizing. But most of the people have to go to the market, buy a machine which will have a Mac installed and take it and then recompile everything and then ship the library. So that's not a feasible solution. That is going to really affect the developer's life. So somebody must answer this question, how to help. So what Sun Microsystem created is Java. Right now it is merged in Oracle. So we know that JDK is available on Oracle website, but it's a baby of Sun Microsystem. So what Sun Microsystem did is they knew that the source code is compiled and it generates a machine code. Rather, they added one extra layer. They said that now once if see the movement with the earlier the diagram is on the right side, now it is moving on the left side. There is a reason why it moved on the left side. So source code is compiled. Rather than generating a machine code, we will generate an intermediate code. So what Sun Microsystem says, I will not generate a platform specific code. Let's say this compiler is for Windows, then I will not generate a machine code for Windows. Rather, I will generate something else. What is that something else? It's called as bytecode. So when you use a Java compiler to compile a source code, it do not generate a machine code. It generate a code called as bytecode. Other people, many communities refer this bytecode as machine intermediate language code, IL, intermediate code even sometimes. So what is the benefit of having this intermediate code? Uh, let's see. So when you compile this Java source code, you get a bytecode. And when this bytecode has to be executed on a computer, this is not a machine code. This is not a machine code. You need someone to convert this bytecode into a machine code. So what Java said is it will add something called as Java Virtual Machine, JVM. So focus on this word. It's a virtual machine. It's a virtual machine. So what is exactly a virtual machine? So focus on this word. It's a virtual machine. So what is exactly a virtual machine? It's a computer. Like you install a virtual box and then you try to what we can say, try to install a Linux operating system on it and use it. So it's a virtual environment. So this Java virtual machine, in turn, it's a kind of a simulation of a operating environment as well as a hardware. And what it does is this JVM have one component inside it. This component is called as JIT, just in time. With the help of this JIT component, and which is inside a JVM, Java Virtual Machine, the JVM converts this bytecode into the underlying platform. So what we are going to have is, we are going to have a source code of Java. If you are using a compiler, if you are using a Windows platform, then you need a compiler. 1 minute, let me bring a highlighter. Okay. So if you are using a Windows platform, you have to use a Windows compiler. If you are using a Linux computer, then you have to use a Linux compiler. If you are using a Mac operating system, you have to use a Mac compiler. But the source code is same. It's the same source code which is going in all three compilers. There is no change in source code. And so what is the beautiful part? You again, somebody may say that you still have three compilers. You still have three compilers, each for Windows platform, Linux platform, and Mac platform, which is matching with the earlier terminology. Like you have a source code, then you have to compile your program in each platform. But what is the beautiful part? This bytecode generated by these all compilers is same. So on this side, you really do not have a separate machine code. So if you have a Windows machine and if you compile your Java source code, it will generate a bytecode. If you have Linux machine and if you compile your Java source code, it will generate a bytecode. And if you have a Mac machine, still you will compile your source code using Java compiler and it will generate a bytecode. But the beautiful part is this bytecode is common. So what is changed here? The change here is this extra layer makes sure that the source code and bytecode do not change even if you change the platform. So the programmer has no task to do. He can select any platform and he is not worried about which platform is used by client or which platform is used by his fellow developer, because what is happening, there is not at all any change in source code and the bytecode generated by the compiler. So they are going to remain same. So even if your client is using Mac and you are using Windows, you are not bothered because you will use Windows compiler and you will get a bytecode. And this bytecode is very compatible with your client of Mac computer. I hope you got this concept. Up to this point is clear. I need some answers on chat. Or rather any question. I will wait for half a minute. If anyone have a question, can post it. Great. So I think you got it. Let's proceed. Look at this transmission. So your bytecode, look at this transition of the diagram. So bytecode is on the right side of this slide. Now moving on to my next slide and see how the bytecode is changing its position from the right side to the left side. And the stack is not changing. Stack is still as it is. So what is happening? Let's go to the very earlier slide. So in this slide, what I said is you have a source code, then you compile it, and then you get a bytecode. Then this bytecode has to go to the JVM, which have in turn JIT, which generates a machine code. So you have 3-layer compilation process as well as 3-layer execution process. Okay, so there is one question from Aditya. Is the bytecode is applicable for C or C++? I guess C and C++ compilers are generating machine code, but if somebody writes a compiler who will take the code of C and convert it into bytecode, that's possible. See, bytecode is a standard. Like machine code is a standard, bytecode is also standard created by Java. If somebody writes a compiler who understands the C syntaxes, which will produce a equivalent code for bytecode platform, then it will be possible to convert C or C++ code into bytecode. But right now, there is no compiler in the market which will generate a C and C++ source code converted into a bytecode. So it might be a project if you want to take it, like you will develop a compiler which will convert C++ source code into bytecode. But that's possible. It's not an impossible task. Right now, there is no compiler in the market which will convert C or C++ code into bytecode. Have I answered your question, Aditya? Okay, great. So let's proceed. So look at this 3-layer architecture. Like you have 3-layer process for the compilation. You have a 3-layer process for the execution. In the next slide, we have this 3-layer process. Layer 1, source code. Layer 2, compilation. Layer 3, bytecode. So you have these 3 layers, and we know that there is a 3-layer process for execution also. So let's see this 3-layer process for the execution. So this is the bytecode on the right side, which goes as an input to the next layer. So the 3-layer process, bytecode was the last step in the first compilation, which becomes the first step in the execution. So this bytecode is given to a JVM, and this JVM generates a machine code. Now there is a change in this. What is the change? In the earlier diagram, this block was common, or this block was generating the same code, which was bytecode. But now this block is taking a common bytecode as an input, but they are generating a machine code which is separate. So machine code for generated by JVM of Windows is separate. The machine code generated by JVM of Linux is separate. The machine code generated by the JVM of Mac OS is separate. Also, you have a separate JVM for Windows, separate JVM for Linux, and separate JVM for Mac OS. So what it means is, in the earlier slide, the bytecode generated is common by all 3 compilers, but there were 3 different compilers for each platform. In the similar way, Java Virtual Machine, which processes the bytecode and generates the machine code or targeted code, is also separate for each platform. There is a JVM for Windows, JVM for Linux, JVM for Mac. And the separate part is the JVM of Windows will generate the machine code specific to Windows. It will not be compatible with the machine code of Linux. It will not be compatible with the machine code of Mac. The Linux JVM will produce a machine code of Linux. It will not be compatible with the machine code of Windows. It will not be compatible with the machine code of Mac, and so on. It will proceed for Mac also. So like your code will be completely dependent on machine, which is generated by JVM. So here I want to raise a point. The point is under discussion is something called as platform independence, which Java always boasted about, or Java, like we can say it, market itself as a platform independent language. So when Java started bragging that it's a platform independent language, a debate started. What is the debate? Java says that I am a truly platform independent language, as if a programmer compile me and gets the bytecode, then that bytecode can be executed on any of the machine despite of recompiling it. Whereas other programming languages, you have to recompile and get the machine code if you want to change the platform. For example, let's go in the early environment. Before machine code, you have to compile your source code each and every time to get a targeted machine code. But with the birth of a bytecode, you can use the same bytecode generated by any of the platform, and this same bytecode can be executed by any of the OS. So you really do not need to recompile your program. So for example, if I want to give you some piece of a code which is executing, what I'll do is I'll develop the program in my Windows. Right now I'm using a Windows operating system. So I'll develop my code using Windows environment. And let's say one of you people is using a Mac, then I'll give you a bytecode file. This bytecode is stored in a file called as .class. It is written here. This bytecode is stored in a file called as .class file. So if I compile my program, Java program, it will generate a file called as .class. This .class file is going to contain bytecode. Now, if I give you this dot class file, and let's say I am using a Windows machine to compile it, I am using a Windows machine to compile it, I get my dot class file which have a bytecode. I will send you this bytecode file, dot class file using an email or maybe using this chat window. You are using a Mac operating system. You download this dot class file, give it to the JVM of your Mac operating system. Then your JVM of Mac will generate a machine code which can execute on Mac. So here, I really do not need to recompile my program for Mac operating system. So that is what Java is claiming, that it's a truly platform independent language. And why the debate started? C++ says that we are also platform independent. In what sense? See, you can write program in C in Linux, in Windows, in Mac, and you can compile them and execute them. So we are also platform independent. So when Java claims that it's a platform independent language, the claim is because of it you can compile it once and execute always, which is not possible with C, C++, or some other languages. So are you really getting point why Java is platform independent and in which context? Or you have any doubt? You can pose the question. Okay, I have few answers. Great. No doubts. Okay. So let's proceed. So what if you are a developer, what you need for development? So you need two layers, two tiers. One tier is you need something to write a source code, like any editor will do. We will talk about editors in detail. So you need an editor to write a source code. Then you need a compiler. The compiler is called as a Java C compiler. So you need to install this compiler on your computer. This Java C compiler comes with a development kit called as JDK. So this Java, JDK stands for Java Development Kit, JDK. So this Java C compiler is shipped with the JDK. So if you want to develop a software using Java, you must need JDK on your computer. You have to install this kit on your computer. Once you have a bytecode, you can give it to your client. Like you are a developer, you are going to write a code as well as you are going to test the code whether it is working properly or not. So to execute a program, to execute this bytecode, you need something called as JVM, which have JIT as its part. This JVM is called as JRE, JRE, Java Runtime Environment, JRE. So this JVM is called as Java Runtime Environment. When you install JDK, it's going to automatically install Java Runtime Environment also. So it installs with JDK. So if you like, if you're a developer, you install a JDK, it will also install JRE for you. So you have both available. You have a Java C compiler available, you have a JVM available, and you can use it for writing a program and testing the program. Now, what if you are not a developer, you are a client? So do you need everything? So let's go to the next slide. No, the client or the person who just needs to execute a computer, he needs only JVM. He do not need JDK. So now why he don't need a JDK? The bytecode is already available and there is nothing left for him for compilation. So everything is already compiled. So you don't need a compiler on execution environment or the client system. The client system only needs a JVM, Java Virtual Machine. Where is this available? It is available in something called as JRE. So for client computer, you have available JRE as a different setup. So let's say you are a client and you do not need JDK, then what you can do is you can go to the Oracle's website and download only JRE and install it separately. So the client machine have a liberty of going to Oracle website and download JRE as a separate entity and install only JRE. So if you install only JRE, you don't have access to JDK. But if you install JDK, the machine knows that you are trying to develop a Java program, so you need both JDK and JRE. So when you install JDK, it will automatically install JRE on your computer. But if you install only JRE, then it's not going to install JDK, because then computer thinks that you are just a client and you're not going to write any program in Java. So both libraries are available to download. JDK have JDK Java Development Kit, which is a Java compiler, as well as JVM with it, which is JRE. JRE software download have only JVM inside it. It do not have JDK. Are we clear? I need some. Okay, great. Yes, good. So let's proceed again. So does JVM makes execution slow? The answer is no. JVM really do not make your execution slow. Let's see how. So there is always a debate point. So this was the layer which started this debate. Java is slow. Why Java is slow when treated as P by people? Look at this. Earlier environment is you have a source code, you have a compiler, you have a machine code. Rather than generating a machine code, what Java is saying is that you have a source code, you compile it, and you get a bytecode. And this bytecode again has to go even to a JVM and then JIT. Okay, there is one question, Mansi Sudhir Patel. It's like Mansi is asking what is JIT. We are going to talk about it. Exact the point. The next point is JIT. So let's discuss JIT. I am right now discussing JIT. Okay, Mansi? Okay, great. So you have source code, compiled it, you get a bytecode. In the earlier environment, you had a source code, you compile it, you get a machine code. Now this bytecode has to be given to a JVM, which in turn gives it to the JIT, which generates a machine code. So you are adding a complete 3 layers before execution. And every time you execute it, you are going to do this. Like your bytecode has to be given to a JVM and then only you get a machine code. Remember guys, I never said that this machine code will be saved in here. Like see, source code is compiled and you get a .class file which stores a bytecode. But when bytecode is given to a JVM, which in turn is given to a JIT, which converts it into the machine code, this machine code is not saved. Each time you give a bytecode to the JVM, it is converted at a runtime. Nobody is saving the bytecode conversion into machine code. You have to pass this bytecode every time to the JVM for execution. So people started arguing that that is going to make task cumbersome. At every time the .class file will be given to a JVM and it is going to convert this bytecode into a machine code each time you need for the execution. But why is it so? Because bytecode can be copied onto any operating system and the JVM of that operating system will convert the bytecode into the machine code. To keep the platform independentness, Java do not save this machine code converted by JVM. It says that I will convert it on the fly. So that point came in as an what you can say bottleneck. Like this bytecode has to be converted every time into the machine code you want to execute. And people started arguing that does it make slow? So answer is no. Then how come even each time you need to convert your bytecode into machine code, the process is not becoming slow? The answer lies in something called as JIT. So JIT is called as just in time. So JIT is called as just in time compiler. Here is again one controversy. Like JIT is called as just in time compiler, but it truly works as an interpreter. So again, what is a compiler and what is an interpreter? Let's answer this one. Suppose you have 10 lines of code in a source code. If you have a 10 lines of a code in a source code, you compile it and if there are no errors in this 10 lines of code, you'll get a machine code or you'll get a target code. Now I will use word called as target code if the compilation is completed. So if you have no errors in your source code, you compile it, you get a target code as an output, right? But if you have an error in any of the line, you get an error log from the compiler. Like we can't generate a target code. These are the errors. On the other hand, what happens with the interpreter is it reads the first line. If there is no error in the first line, it immediately converts it into the target code and tries to execute it. Then it will proceed with the second line. Again, interpreter will check the second line for the errors, and if there are no errors, it will immediately convert it into the target code and will try to execute it. The interpreter will scan your source code from first line to the last line one by one, and each time it will try to execute the line. So let's say your program is perfect till the line number 5 and At line number 6, you have an error. So what will happen in the interpreter cases? It will execute line number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and at 6th line, it will omit out the error that you have an error at line number 6, and this is the error, and go and solve it. So this is the job of an interpreter. Take the line, execute it. Take the line, execute it. So in the case, look at the example of the code. So assume this is a source code, but assume it is as a byte code. So this source code is available and its equivalent byte code is generated. Assume that this is a byte code. So what we are doing in this code is there is a condition if, and it has some 9 lines. Assume there are 9 lines in this byte code. So JVM starts execution of a program. It goes inside this if and it finds that the condition is true. Condition is true. Then what it does is it takes the first line from the if block, converts it into the machine code and executes it. It takes the second line, converts it, execute. Third line, take it, execute. Then ultimately it will reach the closing bracket and it has a else block. This else block will never be converted into machine code. Why it is never been converted into machine code? Because it's never been called. If gets condition true, so it converts this 9 lines of the if block each into the machine code, but it never converts this else block because it's never been called. On the other hand, if this condition is false, this first 9 lines inside if will not be converted into machine code. It will directly convert the else block, line number 10, into the machine code. So that is a beautiful part of a JVM and JIT, just-in-time interpreter, just-in-time compiler, which works as an interpreter, that it converts only the piece of the code which is required for the execution. It do not execute or it do not convert the entire program into the machine code. So in the case of C and C++, let's say that you have 100 lines in the program. When you compile, this all 100 lines are converted into the machine code. And when you try to execute, this all 100 lines will try to come inside a main memory for the execution, and you have to allocate a memory for this all 100 lines. But in the case of Java, even if you have 100 lines of a program, let's say right now you need only first 4 lines for the execution. Then out of 100 lines, only first 4 lines will be brought into the memory by doing conversion. And who will do this? It will be done by JVM. So that's how JVM overcomes the limitation of having an extra layer for the execution. Are we clear? Yes, great. Any doubts? Okay, great. I think there is no doubt. Now, I have one question for all of you. The question is, let me remove those all things that I've put here. So, say why JIT becomes an interpreter. Why Java haven't thought of developing JIT as a compiler? Why JIT became an interpreter? Of course, it's going to improve the efficiency. That's the reason. But why not again make it a compiler? Why JIT? Why Java is so much affirmed that if we make JIT, it will not create a pain? Like I have told you, what interpreter does. It takes the line, try to convert it. If it fails, wants the or gives the error, otherwise convert it into the machine code and try to execute it. So why Java development community is so much affirm that making a JIT interpreter won't create any problem at a runtime? How they are so much sure? Can anybody give me the answer? So I'll wait. I'll take a pause of 1 minute. You can type your answer in the chat box. No issues. Why Java community is so much affirm that JIT, making a JIT interpreter will not create any runtime chaos? Or will not what we can say, led into a runtime error?
हॅलो सर.
हॅलो.
हा सर, सांगू मी म्हणजे मला थोडं वाट.
बोल की बोल.
जेव्हा आपण फर्स्ट टाइम जावा सोर्स कोड बाईट कोड मध्ये कन्वर्ट करतो त्यावेळी इथे कंपायलरचा यूज होतो, म्हणून आपण इथे कंपायलर यूज न करता इंटरप्रिटर यूज करतो.
Yes, correct. So Harshit has also got it. Yeah, that is our correct answer. Aditya. Aditya, yes, you are there, right? Answer was on audio. Who gave the answer? Aditya, you gave the answer, right? I guess he's not in.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is the correct answer. Harshit has also got it. Like bytecode is already present. So bytecode, what is a bytecode? Bytecode is a compiled version of the source code, right? So JavaC compiler has already made sure that there are no errors and it's full proof code and you will not face any syntax error. So Java community was so much affirmed that making a JIT as an interpreter will not create any chaos at a runtime. It will be fine if you just create JIT as a interpreter. And that's how JIT has been added, and it really improves the efficiency by converting only the code which is required for the execution. Now obviously the first question is answered. I have second question for you. Can anybody give me the answer in which case this feature will be turned into a disadvantage? Like, what is a feature? You convert the code on the fly whenever it is required. Only that line is converted into a machine code and will be executed. So this is a feature of JIT which makes it efficient, memory efficient, quick, fast. But what is a limitation of this feature? In which case this feature will become a limitation. You can type your answers in the chat box or somebody can give me the answer. Okay, one more thing. My meeting time is about to end. Just 5 minutes are left. So this meeting may end abruptly. No worries. In the tomorrow session, we'll start with the exact point where will this meeting ends. Fine. So give me the answer. This feature will be turned into a disadvantage. In what case this feature will be turned into a disadvantage? Any answers? If you have both JDK and JVM, I guess. So, Shardul, I guess that's not the answer. Why? See, if you want to develop a Java program, you're not going to need JDK, Java Development Kit, as well as JVM. So that's not a problem because you will compile a source code into a bytecode and that bytecode has to be executed by JVM. So that's not a problem. See, I'll repeat my question. What JIT is doing is it taking a bytecode, one line of a bytecode, and it is converting into the machine code, right? Then it will take the second line and then it will convert it into the machine code. Then it will take the third line, again it will convert it into the machine code. This is a feature that you are converting only the code which is required. So even if you are developing using a JDK and then you are testing a JVM, this is not going to change. If you are only a client, still this scenario is not going to change. So there is no relation in what I am asking. Like it is not related to you have both JDK and JVM. It's not going to change whether you are developing or you are executing, because what JVM is doing, taking a line, converting it, executing it. So actually you will write something inside a program which will make it, which will, what we can say, which will be a tedious job for JIT and JVM. It has to do it. So can anyone tell me what piece of a code will make it as an disadvantage? This feature will be turned into a disadvantage if you have that kind of a piece of a code in your program. So what kind of code will turn this advantage into a disadvantage? Yes, you got it. Ishwari got it. Okay. So Ishwari, I've posted answer and few other answers are there. Okay, fine. Let me check all the answers. So no conditional statement. Great. That is a quite relative answer. Then it requires more time. Yes, that's a correct answer. Also quite relative. And when we want to make more changes in program. Okay. So Sakshi, maybe that is like we want to change programs more frequently. That is we are in development phase. So it will not affect the client. Still a valid answer, but the very pinpointed answer is given by Ishwari. The answer is while loop, or not even while loop, loops. So let's say that I have a for loop which is going to run 10,000 times, and this for loop have 10 lines inside it. So what JVM will do is it will take the for loop condition, convert it into a machine code, then it will go on to the first line in the for loop, convert it into a machine code, then it will go to the second line, convert it into a machine code. It will execute all 10 lines inside a for loop. It will come back to the first line. Then have we saved the machine code? No, we are not saving the machine code. So again, it will take the first line from the for loop, convert it into the machine code. It will take the second line from the for loop, convert it into the machine code. It will take the third line from the for loop, convert it into machine loop. And this story will repeat 10,000 times. So if you have a loop, then this is not a optimized case. Loops turn this advantage into a disadvantage, that you have to convert the same code again and again. Whereas in the traditional environment, you have a loop pre-compiled into machine code, so you can directly execute it every time it requires. And here, JVM has to convert this 10 lines 10,000 times each time it is required. Do you really get it, what I am saying? Infinite loop, yes, of course. Aditya covered infinite loop is also answer. Great. So what JVM come up with? Earlier, there was no solution with the JVM for this, but JVM learned this and JVM evolved. The solution is called as something called as a hotspot. So why the terminology used as hotspot? Like say in the real world, any material used very frequently catch the heat, like a piston. If you are running or you're accelerating a car or a bike with very